In a world brimming with supernatural claims, there was one moment that made even Ed Warren hesitate. A rare occurrence in a career filled with darkness. This is not just another exorcism story. This is the case Ed himself described as evil in its purest form. What horrors did the Warrens witness that pushed them to their spiritual and emotional limits? Leave your theories in the comments below as we unravel one of the most disturbing chapters of their legacy. The first snowfall had already blanketed the rooftops of Ashcroft, a quiet New England town that hadn't seen much outside attention since the 1950s. But on a cold November morning, a letter found its way into the hands of Ed and Lorraine Warren. The handwriting was unsteady, rushed, almost desperate. "Come quickly. The church cannot handle what resides here. We tried, and it retaliated." The sender was Father Thomas Byrne, a seasoned clergyman known for his skepticism toward anything that strayed from traditional doctrine. If even he was pleading for their help, something was very wrong. The envelope contained a photograph, grainy, taken in haste, showing a girl no older than 10, her eyes rolled back, mouth frozen in a silent scream. Behind her, barely visible in the mirror, was a silhouette that twisted in ways the human body never should. By the time Ed and Lorraine arrived in Ashcroft, the air was heavy with more than just cold. Locals avoided the Harrow estate like a plague. The house, perched atop a hill surrounded by dead trees and forgotten paths, looked like time itself had abandoned it. Windows were boarded, yet strange lights flickered inside after dusk. The townsfolk whispered of screams at night, livestock found mutilated, and shadows moving in broad daylight. Father Byrne greeted the Warrens with sunken eyes and a trembling voice. "I should never have attempted it. I thought my faith was strong enough." Lorraine touched his arm gently. "What happened, Father?" She spoke in tongues. Not one, but many. My crucifix melted in my hand. When I tried to pray, she laughed and called me by my birth name. Name no one here knows." Ed exchanged a grim look with Lorraine. They had faced demons before. But this wasn't just malevolence. This was precision, calculation. It knew who it was tormenting and how. The Harrow family had been Catholic for generations. Michael Harrow, the father, sat in a corner clutching a rosary that had long since broken. His wife Ellen stood silently near the staircase, eyes distant, skin pale. Their daughter, Rachel, remained locked in her room on the 3rd floor, sedated and tied to the bed for her own safety. "She hasn't been our daughter for months," Ellen whispered. "Whatever's up there, it's not Rachel." And so the Warrens stepped into the darkness, armed with relics, prayer, and faith. But already, something inside that house was watching and waiting. The first night was always the worst. Lorraine couldn't sleep. Even before entering the Harrow home, she had felt it, a pressure on her chest, a buzzing in her ears. But now, standing in the hallway outside Rachel's room, she felt as though invisible hands were wrapped around her throat. Every mirror was covered with cloth. Every surface bore scratch marks, some recent. A crucifix near the stairwell had turned upside down without being touched. Ed, meanwhile, was downstairs with Father Byrne, examining the failed exorcism documents. "You didn't follow the Roman ritual exactly," Ed noted, eyes scanning the faded pages. "You skipped the litany of the saints." Byrne shook his head. "She began convulsing before I could even finish the invocation. The air turned sulfuric. My lungs burned." Ed paused. "Lorraine said something's drawing power from your fear. We've seen this before, but this feels amplified." Upstairs, Lorraine entered Rachel's room for the first time. The girl was awake but unmoving, staring at the ceiling with unblinking eyes. Around her, the walls pulsed, not literally, but in that psychic space Lorraine inhabited. Something was alive in the corners, whispering. The room's temperature dropped suddenly, her breath turning to mist. "Rachel." Lorraine stepped closer. The girl's lips moved, but the voice was not hers. "You cannot save what has already been claimed." Lorraine stepped back. "Who are you?" It laughed. "You know me, witch. We met in the South once. I broke a child's spine just to watch you cry." Lorraine stumbled. The reference was real, a possession case in Georgia over a decade ago. Only Ed and she had known about the spinal fracture. This entity, whatever it was, remembered her. It had encountered them before. Downstairs, Ed heard the laugh echo and ran up. As he entered, Rachel's eyes turned black and she let out a guttural howl that shook the room. The crucifix Lorraine carried flared and cracked. Ed raised his rosary. "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you." But the girl screamed again, and a gust of wind threw him against the wall with supernatural force. Rachel collapsed, unconscious. Later, as they sat in the kitchen, Lorraine was trembling. "It's not just a possession, Ed. It's a vengeance. This entity, it's personal." Ed nodded slowly. "Then we'll fight it personally." But neither of them slept that night. Morning brought no comfort. The sun barely pierced through the gray clouds that clung low over Ashcroft, as if nature itself refused to shine upon the Harrow estate. Inside, the tension was palpable. The air smelled of mildew, old blood, and burnt wood, a combination Lorraine couldn't shake from her senses. Ed gathered the family in the parlor, a room that had once held family photos and laughter, now stripped to bare walls and dim light. "We need to understand how this began," he said calmly, though his voice carried the weight of urgency. Michael Harrow, his hands shaking, began to speak. "It started 3 months ago when we found a wooden box in the attic. It was behind the beams, wrapped in burlap and twine. Rachel insisted it felt warm, like it was breathing." He swallowed hard. Inside was a carved idol, some kind of figure with horns, and a scroll in Latin. Ed and Lorraine exchanged a look. "You still have it?" she asked. Michael nodded. "I reburied it, but not before we read part of the scroll." That night, Rachel began talking in her sleep. Lorraine's voice turned grave. "That box was never meant to be opened. What you found wasn't an artifact. It was a vessel." Ellen began to weep softly. Rachel stopped eating. Then she started sleepwalking into the cellar. One night, we found her speaking in a man's voice, a voice that called itself Valakar. Ed stiffened. That name. He had read about it once in a Vatican transcript, a demonic force believed to be a sub-prince of pestilence known to inhabit sacrificial idols across Europe. It had been linked to cases where entire families had fallen into madness and murder. The house had become a prison. Lights turned on by themselves. Clocks stopped at 3:15 a.m. Doors slammed. Voices whispered obscenities. Michael's hair began to gray. Ellen developed bruises in her sleep. And Rachel changed. She said we weren't her parents anymore. Ellen whispered. She said we were worms, just worms. Lorraine stood, her eyes distant. There's something deeper here. It's not just a haunting, it's a curse, and it's growing. In that moment, the wall clock shattered on its own. From upstairs came a noise, a guttural cry of agony. Rachel was awake, and she was screaming. That night, the storm began. Heavy rain lashed against the windows as Ed and Lorraine prepared a temporary containment ritual. It would not expel the entity, but it could weaken its grip, long enough to understand its true nature. Lorraine lit white candles and arranged salt lines around Rachel's bed. Ed placed a relic crucifix at each corner of the room. Father Byrne stood outside the doorway, clutching holy water and reciting psalms. At precisely 3 a.m., it began. Rachel opened her eyes, but what looked back at them wasn't a 10-year-old girl. Her pupils dilated until her eyes were pitch black, her skin pale and veined. "You dare return," she hissed. "I broke your faith once, Warren. I will break your soul." The room trembled. Paintings fell from the walls. The air grew thick, impossible to breathe. Suddenly, from within the walls, came voices, overlapping, whispering, taunting. "Come play. Die screaming. Your God is deaf." They moved through the house like a chorus of the damned, echoing through every hallway. Lorraine clutched her head. Overwhelmed by psychic noise, she fell to her knees. Ed raised a crucifix. "By the power of the Lord Jesus Christ." But the voices only grew louder, more frenzied. The salt lines flared and then went out. One candle exploded in a gust of black smoke. Then Rachel levitated. Ellen shrieked as her daughter's body rose from the bed, suspended in air, arms stretched unnaturally wide. A shadow coalesced behind her, tall, horned, pulsing with malice. Lorraine forced herself up, her voice shaking but firm. "I see you. You have no right to remain here. This child is under divine protection." The shadow grinned, a twisted distortion of a face, and suddenly slammed Rachel's body down onto the bed. Her body bounced once. The floorboards cracked beneath her. Silence followed. Rachel breathed barely, but Lorraine could still hear the voices in the walls. They were not done. No one wanted to speak of the attic. It had been locked since Rachel's possession began. Not out of superstition, but survival. Every time someone tried to open the door, a piercing wail echoed through the house. The last attempt left Michael, Harrow, with a dislocated shoulder and blood pouring from his ears. Ed insisted. "Whatever was unleashed started in that room. It's where we'll find answers." Lorraine hesitated at the base of the stairs. Her intuition screamed against ascending, but duty outweighed fear. Together with Ed and Father Byrne, she climbed the narrow staircase. Each step creaked under their weight, the wood groaning as if reluctant to give passage. At the top, the attic door loomed like an ancient monolith. Ed pressed his hand against it. Cold. Not just absence of heat cold, this was the stillness of a tomb. He used a blessed key Lorraine had prepared and turned the lock. It clicked with an unnatural finality. The door opened slowly. What lay beyond was not just forgotten boxes and dust. The air was thick with incense and rot. The attic had been transformed, at some point, into a makeshift ritual chamber. Symbols were carved into the wooden beams, painted in dried blood. In the center sat the wooden idol Michael had described, now cracked but humming with energy. Lorraine gasped. This wasn't just an artifact. This was a beacon. The scroll lay nearby, partially unrolled. Latin invocations were etched in human hair. Ed picked it up and read aloud, slowly. Each word felt like a weight, pressing into the fabric of reality. With the last syllable, the idol pulsed. A scream erupted from the object, high-pitched, mechanical, unearthly. Then silence. Lorraine fell to her knees, entering a trance. Her body went rigid. Ed rushed to her, but she spoke before he touched her. Her name was Claudia Harrow. She lived here a century ago. She was pregnant. The town called her a witch. They burned her alive in this room. Ed listened, horrified. She cursed her own bloodline in her final breath. She swore her child would be vengeance. That child, that line, is Rachel. When Lorraine awoke, her eyes were wet with tears. It's not just a possession. It's generational damnation. And the demon, Valakar, was merely the instrument. After the revelations in the attic, there was no more denying the truth. The Harrows were cursed, bound by the pain of an ancestor burned, alive, hunted by an ancient demon that fed on bloodline vengeance. For Ed and Lorraine, it wasn't just about saving a girl. It was about severing a chain forged in hatred and fire. Ed began preparations for the first major exorcism attempt. It had to be conducted at midnight, the only hour when Valakar's grip was weakest. Holy water was blessed, relics selected, prayer circles drawn in consecrated chalk. Lorraine fasted, meditated, and prayed, but she was growing weak. The trance had taken a toll on her spirit. That evening, as dusk fell, the house grew quiet, too quiet. Suddenly, Lorraine collapsed. Ed rushed to her side. Her skin was ice. Her pulse was faint. "Lorraine, stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open, revealing whites clouded with smoke-like shadows. It's inside me now. It's trying to silence me." Ed didn't hesitate. He called Father Byrne and began a minor rite of deliverance, not to cast out the demon from Lorraine, but to expel its influence, a temporary reprieve. As he prayed, Lorraine's body convulsed. Her voice joined his, but layered, distorted. She was being pulled between two worlds. "I am not yours." She screamed, her voice overlapping with a guttural, demonic tone. A crucifix hanging from her neck burned red hot, branding her skin. Ed gripped it, chanting louder, tears streaking down his face. "By the authority of Christ, I bind you. You shall not pass beyond this vessel." With one final cry, Lorraine let out a breath that shook the walls. She collapsed into his arms, barely conscious. "Ed, I saw it. The full ritual. How to stop it. But we'll need her. We'll need Rachel. It was now or never." Thank you so much for sticking with us this far. If you've been following this story, know that the best is yet to come. The most intense and dangerous part of the Warrens' spiritual battle against this ancient curse is about to begin. The rain had not stopped for 2 days. It was as if the very skies mourned the Harrow's fate. Inside the estate, Ed prepared the parlor, now converted into a sacred battleground. The room was stripped of furniture, walls lined with salt, mirrors covered in linen. An altar was erected in the center, flanked by crucifixes and blessed artifacts from the Warren collection. Rachel lay on the ground, bound only by faith. No ropes, no restraints. Lorraine insisted she must face this conscious. Her will must resist him too. At exactly midnight, Father Byrne began the ancient Roman ritual. His voice trembled at first, then gained strength. Latin prayers filled the room. Holy water sizzled as it touched Rachel's skin. Her body arched violently. Ed held the Bible close, voice firm. "We cast you out, every unclean spirit, every satanic power, every onslaught of the infernal adversary." Rachel's eyes snapped open. "You speak words you do not understand, mortal." The voice that emerged from her was impossibly deep, layered with echoes. It carried the weight of centuries, a tone that did not belong to any living thing. Objects shook, windows cracked. Father Byrne continued, "By the sign of the Holy Cross, from our enemies deliver us, O Lord." Rachel began to levitate again. Her arms stretched to her sides, her back arched, mouth gaping in a silent scream. Suddenly, every light in the house exploded. Darkness swallowed them. Only the glow of the candles remained, flickering against an unseen wind. Then came the screams, not Rachel's, but the shrieks of others. Dozens, hundreds, from the walls, the floors, the ceilings. Ghosts of the past, souls twisted in torment. Lorraine dropped to her knees, clutching her chest. "They're trapped. Claudia's descendants. They've been feeding it for generations." Rachel's body convulsed, her voice distorted beyond recognition. "You cannot kill what was born of fire and betrayal. I am the curse incarnate." A painting on the wall burst into flames. Ed stepped forward, undeterred. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, be gone, Rachel." Shrieked. The room convulsed with supernatural force. Furniture flew, crosses turned. One of the relics shattered. But then, silence. Rachel collapsed. Her breathing was shallow, her skin cold. But the presence, it was gone, or so they thought. The morning brought cautious hope. Rachel opened her eyes and whispered, "Where am I?" She didn't recognize Ed or Lorraine or her own parents. Her voice was hers again. Ellen sobbed uncontrollably. Michael clutched his daughter's hand as if afraid to let her go. Lorraine gently laid a blessed cloth over Rachel's forehead. I think we got him," Ed whispered, his voice hoarse. But Lorraine didn't move. She stared at the window. The frost on the glass had formed a shape, a sigil, one she'd seen in the attic. Her pulse quickened. She turned to Ed. "It's not over." That night, just after sunset, the family's dog began barking, not at a person, but at the shadows near the stairs. Michael went to investigate. There was nothing. Until the lights dimmed, Rachel began to scream again. This time, it wasn't possession. It was terror. "He's back. He never left. He's inside me again." Lorraine placed her hands on Rachel's shoulders, but the girl recoiled. "Don't touch me. He'll hurt you too." The temperature dropped rapidly. Condensation appeared on every surface. The air became thick and wet, as if submerged in water. The cross in Lorraine's hand vibrated, then cracked in half. Suddenly, Rachel looked up, but it wasn't her gaze anymore. You thought banishment was victory, Ed Warren. You closed a door but forgot the window. The voice was mocking. Ed's face turned grim. The demon didn't possess Rachel this time. It latched onto the house itself. Lorraine nodded. It's using the structure. The wood, the blood-stained beams, the cursed foundation. It's becoming the house. Now they understood. The exorcism didn't drive it away. It changed the battlefield. The entity was no longer inside a vessel. It had become the battlefield, and they were all inside it. The Harrow estate was no longer a home. It was a living entity. Every creak of the floorboard was a breath. Every shadow on the wall, an eye. The structure pulsed with something ancient and foul. Ed and Lorraine knew that what they were facing was no longer a case of possession. It was infestation, corruption of matter itself, and it had a name. Lorraine meditated in the chapel room they hastily sanctified near the basement. With rosary in hand, she entered a deep trance, her consciousness stretching beyond the veil. She navigated darkness, searching for the core of the curse. There, in the void, she found it. A figure wreathed in ash and fire, bound in chains, made from bone. It spoke with no mouth. Its words echoed inside her mind. I was born in the scream of a dying witch. I was nourished by blood. I am Valakar. Lorraine's breath caught. Why this family? You hunt me across lifetimes, medium. You burned me in the temples of Thrace. You sealed me in stone in Alexandria. But always, I return. Suddenly, Lorraine saw flashes, ancient incarnations of herself and Ed, fighting the same entity under different names, in different eras. It wasn't just vengeance. It was a cycle, a curse repeating through time. Back in the physical world, Lorraine awoke screaming. Ed held her. What did you see? It's more than Rachel. More than this house. It's a generational echo. We've fought this before, in other lives. Ed's face tightened. Then we ended in this one. They prepared for a final confrontation. Not just an exorcism, a purification of the house's very foundation. Ed retrieved a relic once deemed too powerful to use, the Thorn of St. Barachiel, a divine artifact capable of severing spiritual bonds. They gathered the Harrows in the parlor once more. Lorraine stood at the center, eyes closed, speaking the true name of Valakar. I command thee, by the light eternal, be revealed. The walls bled. Black ooze poured from the ceiling. The floor shook. Rachel fell to her knees, whispering words in an ancient tongue. A rift opened in the air itself, a tear in the fabric of reality. From it emerged Valakar, no longer hiding behind Rachel's eyes or the creaking walls. It stood tall, cloaked in a veil of shadows, its head crowned with twisted horns, eyes glowing with spite. The air became impossible to breathe. Ed held the thorn high. You are bound no more. You have no place in this world. Valakar laughed, a sound like iron scraping bone. You dare unmake me? Lorraine joined him. You are not eternal. You are not divine. You are forgotten. And together they plunged the thorn into the ground. The house screamed. Not metaphorically. It emitted a high-pitched wail that shattered every window, splintered every beam. Valakar thrashed, but the light from the thorn spread through the walls like fire through dry leaves. The demon lunged. Time slowed. Ed shielded Lorraine. The entity passed through him like smoke, but his body trembled violently, eyes rolling back. Lorraine caught him before he fell. I'm fine, he gasped. Keep going. Rachel began to convulse again, the last tendrils of darkness gripping her soul. Lorraine stepped forward, hand on her chest. I see you. You have no dominion here. She whispered a sacred verse, a celestial command passed down through ages. A voice not her own spoke with her, as if an angel had joined the invocation. The rift widened, and then, with a thunderous crack, the entity shrieked one last time and disintegrated, pulled into the abyss. The house went silent. Rachel collapsed, eyes closed, finally at peace. The structure groaned and creaked, then began to decay. Walls sagged, the air cleared. Light broke through the windows. The Harrow family wept. Michael held Ellen and Rachel tightly, as if anchoring them to this world. Ed, still weak, leaned against the doorway. "It's done." Lorraine nodded, tears in her eyes. For this life, at least. Later that morning, as the sun rose over Ashcroft for the first time in days, the Warrens packed their tools. The town would eventually move on. The house would be torn down. But the legacy of that night would remain. And so would the warnings. Some entities don't just haunt, they remember. What would you do if the house you lived in began to breathe, to bleed, to speak with the voices of the dead? If the curse ran not just through your blood, but through time itself? Ed and Lorraine Warren faced that horror, and barely made it through. Tell us in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Do you believe curses can span generations? If you're still here, thank you deeply for watching until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real cases that defy explanation, and click on the next video we've recommended. You won't believe what the Warrens faced next.